Welcome into Payoff Pitch Action Network's MLB betting podcast. We are presented by BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. We are recording on Wednesday, March 13th, Wednesday morning, and we are here for another division preview on Payoff Pitch. We're breaking down the AL Central. Brendan Glasheen joined by two of our Action Network MLB contributors, Sean Zerillo and Anthony DeBundo, joining us this week for this particular episode. We've got a few previews out already, and they're going live each and every day. So hopefully you're keeping your eye out. Scroll back on the podcast. Wherever you listen, please leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you find the pod. Positive, negative feedback appreciated in those reviews. The 5 stars help us greatly. So either way, thank you very much for listening. Also, if you are tuning in to our Payoff Pitch division previews, you can find us on YouTube, the Action Network YouTube channel. If you would like to look at us and get a video version, a sense of where we are really at, and you can dive into our minds and how we're thinking. Or you just want to watch on video. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. A lot of other good stuff going on over there. So please find us there, Action Network YouTube. During the season, we will have Payoff Pitch Mondays, Tuesdays, and Fridays during the season. Same deal as last year. So 3 days of coverage once the real games begin. I think that's all the housekeeping. So let's dive into the AL Central. Minnesota Twins are the favorite to come out of the division at minus 125. Zerillo, why do we think the Twins, you have high hopes for the Twins, if I remember correctly, just sprinkling around the other episodes we've done in the American League. We've done the West, we've done the East, we haven't done the Central yet. Why are there high hopes for the Twins this year?
Best team in a weak division, good enough to comfortably make the playoffs. And then from there, I think they actually have the pieces to make a deep run. They went to the second round last year, finally got over their long playoff hump, won a playoff series, and maybe this year they can take another step forward, potentially make the ALCS or even go forward and make the World Series. But I like the high-end pitching on this team. Bailey Ober looks better in spring training. His velocity is up. Louis Varland's velocity was hitting 100 miles an hour at the end of last season. They have really good pieces in their bullpen. One of the best closers in baseball in Yohan Duran, but plenty of guys behind him. Griffin Jax, Mancanerino, who are really live arms. And come October, I think these guys are amongst the best relievers in the American League. A really solid pitching staff, a couple of stars in their lineup. Royce Lewis, I think, is one of the best players in the American League. Hopefully he can stay healthy and show that over a full season. So I like the high-end star talent on this Twins team. But from a season-long perspective, from a depth perspective, I'm not necessarily sure there's value betting on either their over or under. I have them at about 85 wins. The projection market has them between 85 and 87 wins. So I'm towards the lower end of that projection. I think there's reasons to take a shot against them with another team in this division. But from a projection standpoint and betting the World Series and having a team who's very safe to make it to October and then has actually talent to do something from there, the lowest projection for Minnesota to win the World Series is 3.3%. The highest is 3.9%. So everybody has them between 25 to 1 and 35 to win the World Series. I bet them earlier in the offseason at 40 to 1. I think that's just a bet worth poking at this point in time, considering it's something that I expect to be closer to 20 to 1 by the time they actually make the playoffs. As I said, there's value taking a shot against them to win the division. Don't necessarily see them, any value relative to their win total. But I do like the higher end talent, and in particular, the arms. Pablo Lopez tied with Garrett Cole and George Kirby for pitching plus last year, 109. The only pitcher they were behind as a group was Spencer Strider. Pablo for wins leader this year at 60 to 1, I think is interesting. We'll probably bet that down to 30 to 1. Project him 8th in wins for 2024. And then also for strikeout leader at 25 to 1. He tied for 3rd last season, projects 4th in strikeouts for this season. Probably going to need Spencer Strider to miss some time in order to cash any strikeout leader bet against him. But I think Pablo the best bet of the group near him at 25 to 1. The other group in that range was sitting about half that price at 12 to 1. And then finally, Yohan Duran, saves leader at 20 to 1. Minnesota was using him as a fireman, kind of hybrid closer setup man 2 years ago. In the second half of last season, exclusively used as a closer. Finally, one of the best pitch mechanics in baseball. I mean, one of the nastiest pitchers in baseball, period. I think it's him and Camilo Doval at the top of the heap for me when it comes to closers. 102 mile an hour fastball, that 98 mile an hour splinker, throws a curveball too. Duran is impossible. I think he crosses 100 strikeouts this year. I think he's the reliever of the year, and I think he has a good chance to lead the league in saves as well. So some pitcher props for me on the Twins in addition to that World Series future. If you could get 35-1 or better on the Twins to win the World Series right now, I think it's worth poking.
So Dabundo, they made some changes in the offseason, or I should really say that a couple of their arms left, but it sounds like based on Zerillo's analysis that he's more than hopeful for some of the other arms they have in the ranks. They lost Sonny Gray, for example, in the offseason. They also lost Kenta Maeda from their rotation. So do they have any concern that the Twins can't control this division throughout the course of the year? Minus 125, the favorite to win the division.
Yeah, I think if you look at kind of the history of this division the last couple of years, I think they've been the best team in the division each of the last 2 years, and I still think they're clearly the best team in this division. We keep projecting, and I think the market is expecting Detroit, Kansas City to take real steps forward this year, and they're kind of the hot darling teams of the offseason because of some of the offseason additions in Detroit. People have been kind of waiting for the breakouts, and they've lost going again with Detroit the last couple of years, and then now maybe this is the year we're doing this same kind of song and dance again. But I still think Minnesota's a class above. And I think the one stat that kind of isolates their domination of this division is ISO. Minnesota was a top 5 team in isolated power last year in all of baseball. The rest of the division, the Royals were 21st. The White Sox were 25th. The Tigers were 27th, and Cleveland was dead last. So you've got 4 teams in the division that just don't have the kind of power to keep up with a Minnesota offense that can slug with the best. And that's a Minnesota offense. I know we do the same thing every year with Buxton. It's Buxton Mania time. Like, he is going to start the year healthy. Maybe he won't stay healthy again, and maybe he won't be able to play, but there's always still that chance that they get the high-end Buxton season. Correa, had one of the worst years of his career last year. You'd expect some type of bounce back. He's not at the age where you'd expect full decline, and his underlying profile was pretty much fine relative to past seasons as well. So I really don't have a great explanation other than probably injury why Correa wasn't at his best last year or close to it. So, there's that upside. And then they finally got Edward Julian, more everyday playing time toward the end of the season. And I think he is going to be on base as much as anybody in baseball. And Royce Lewis has their budding superstar potential upside. They have depth in their batters. They can platoon some guys and make it work offensively. So I do like this offense to continue to by far slug the most in all of this division. And then on the pitching side, one of the reasons I think we were bullish on Minnesota last year going into the playoffs was just how much versatility they had. 2 years ago, when Minnesota was the best team in the division, their bullpen was so bad they couldn't get anybody out. They blew so many games, especially to Cleveland that season. And it's why they were kind of under, they ended up blowing the division. Last year, we kind of saw what a more normal season play out was, which is that the Guardians have a relatively low ceiling given their talent. And I don't think that ceiling is enough to keep up with Minnesota. So I like Minnesota to win the division. It's chalky, it's square, but I'm laying it just because I really don't think that the contending pack has made enough of a leap to catch them. So there's a minus 110 out there that I like on Minnesota to win the division. A pitcher that I'm buying this year is Louis Varland. Sean mentioned, the velocity bump, fastball and slider, 107 stuff plus on both last year. Congratulations to anybody who had the under on my mentions of stuff plus time to mention the first time. But I also think, Varland last year, elite strikeout minus walk rate, just couldn't control the home runs. And that's been a problem for this staff a little bit too, with Joe Ryan as well. I think if they develop their arsenals a little bit more, you could see those home run rates come down a little bit. And I think that just naturally, giving up 2.2 homers per 9 is not really sustainable. And so Varland is due for a potential breakout. You mentioned Bailey Ober, another elite command guy who doesn't walk batters. This is a good rotation from guys you maybe don't know, but guys who are going to produce above their names. And then, of course, the bullpen looks great with Jackson Duran back there.
No Joe Ryan mentioned this year?
I mentioned Joe. I mean, Joe's got to...
I meant a pick, 20-1 Cy Young, no?
No, that's not good enough for me,
okay.
Unfortunately. I mean, last year we were getting him 40-1.
Yeah.
And then he kind of collapsed at the end of the season and kept giving up homers after homer after homer. And the splitter that he was developing didn't really stick. So he kind of became a 2-pitch guy. And that's just, he's not Spencer Strider. You kind of have to be that good to get away with that. So I think you'll see Ryan work to develop his arsenal more. I think he'll have a good season, but I don't see him unless he really pops. But at 20-1, it's not really worth it to me.
Yeah, Pablo is a tier above him for me.
Yeah.
And Pablo's he's about around 8-9 to 1 right now. In some shops.
Well, the AL Cy Young race is certainly interesting now. Garrett Cole getting the MRI. We don't know the status of that. Kevin Gausman's barely going to make opening day, it looks like, if not at all, because he's been dealing with some shoulder fatigue. So you've got the top two favorites coming into the season, not 100%. And that's really just like, it's kind of like fantasy football nowadays, where you just draft a team and then you just do prayer circles and hope that they don't get hurt. That's pitching in baseball now. Like, you just have to pick guys to win Cy Young and then like pray that they're not the ones that catch the elbow injury in mid-May.
Right. Or you pick the diamond in the rough, like you guys run Grayson Rodriguez for this year. You were talking about that last year, and I'm not sure where that price. It's 27 to 1 now. I'm sure you guys got better numbers, or slightly better numbers than that.
Yeah, I'd still take Grayson to 25, 20 to 1 now. I mean, he was my favorite bet for the category, but we were on Sandy like the September before we bet him for Cy Young. It was, hey, Sandy is trending towards Cy Young level. I always try to identify guys in September of the previous year who I think I'm going to be targeting for next year, and then hoping we're not getting 20 to 1 or worse on them. There's a group of guys, Grayson, obviously we talked about, but Bobby Miller, I thought their prices would have been shorter just by nature of us talking about them, other people piling on. So it's very price dependent category for me. And considering the injuries, you really don't want to be taking lower than 25 to 1 on anybody.
Yeah, there's a couple guys before the season, mid-season, a little different, but there's a couple guys who we're going to mention, I think, on this episode, who are getting a lot of buzz. Who I'm like more just like, okay, wait a second, because of the injury concerns, like for Detroit and Kansas City especially, and just like yes, when they actually pitch, like I'm going to say his name now, Tarek Skubal is like probably a top 5 pitcher in baseball, but it's a big when they actually pitch is like you have to actually pitch to win these awards, unfortunately. So that's something that you have to kind of consider with Cy Youngs and how much risk tolerance you have and how much you want to throw out in a market that like half your guys could just get hurt and only pitch 120 innings.
Yeah, we'll talk about Reagan's as well.
So along those same lines, let's go to the Guardians. They file in next as far as win projection. Guardians are at 79.5 wins. They won 76 games last year, plus 350 to win the division. Pacoda's got them at 83.7 wins, just behind Minnesota. Speaking of pitching, and you look at the American League Cy Young, you see Bieber's 30 to 1, Tanner Bibby 40 to 1. So they've got some young pitching, and Bieber's not young anymore, but Bibby's kind of this up and comer, which Dabundo teased. We'll talk about more pitching with this division in this particular episode. So are the Guardians are they going to be that dark horse team, Zerillo, that does give the Twins trouble? How would you bet the Guardians if you think the Twins win the division?
I think the Guardians are a sleeper, and I'm actually surprised so many people are doubting them. This was the youngest team in baseball 2 years ago when they made the playoffs. Still one of the youngest teams in baseball. Yeah. Shane Bieber, I know you said he's not young. Shane Bieber's only 29 years old. I mean, on paper, right, in a vacuum, I would have been like, Shane Bieber's 31, 32? No, he's 29. Went to Driveline this offseason. Velo back up. I've been very down on Shane Bieber for the last 2 years.
First Driveline plug. We got Stuff Plus and Driveline. Here we go, baby. We're back.
Yep. We did the bingo card. We're filling in the spaces very slowly here. But Shane Bieber is going to have a bounce back season. I'm pretty convinced, for as long as he's on the mound and as long as he's healthy. They didn't have Tristan McKenzie last year. He's the kind of guy, physically, you're not really sure how many innings you're going to get out of him if he's going to stay healthy. But his entire rotation is, other than Bieber's, 26 years or younger. The bullpen is elite. The defense is elite. They project as the best defensive team in baseball. They were really bad defensively last year compared to what you would expect. They were closer to league average. They projected as a top 3 defensive team. They project as a top 3 defensive team this year, and I think they should get back to it. So significant defensive regression, significantly better bullpen performance than what they had last year because their bullpen was really struggling. Not sure if they got the sticky stuff back in the bullpen in Cleveland towards the end of the year or what was going on, but it always comes down to the offense with this team. And as Anthony mentioned, there's no power in this division and very little power on this Guardians roster. They're a hit-to-contact team. They use their speed to run around the bases, and they projected last year to benefit from the new rule changes as much as any team, and they really didn't take advantage of it. I think you can expect that they will benefit more from it this year, and I can't harp on the age enough. Go to roster resource. Look at the ages for all of the guys on this roster aside from Jose Ramirez. They're all under 30 years old. You can bake in improvement and progression for almost all of them. Again, this was a team who made the playoffs 2 years ago with the very similar roster, which was the youngest team in the league by far. And now they're 2 years older, had a hiccup last year, but I think this team is still very capable of overperforming and getting back to the playoffs. Yes, the ceiling is probably capped at about 85 to 87 wins. They're going to need the Twins to hit the lower end of their projection, and the Guardians are going to need to hit the upper end of their projection. But I see value on the Guardians to win their division, and I'm only projecting them for 79.7 wins. The range of projections out there is between 79.9 and 85. So I'm basically the lowest projection amongst the entire market. The low of those projections has the Guardians at plus 400 to win the division, which is right in line with their fair odds. Pacoda makes this line plus 140. So Pacoda sees substantial value in the number. Based on where I have these two teams projected, Minnesota and Cleveland, both at the lower end of their projection, I still see value on Cleveland to make the playoffs. Not a huge edge. Probably make this line closer to plus 350, plus 325, but enough to bet it at plus 400. Also like their odds to make the playoffs. Took that at plus 250. The projection range, right, from Fangraphs, Pacoda, Zips, anywhere between even money and plus 214. So getting plus 250 of value no matter what source you compare it to there. And then the last thing I'm watching aside from one MVP bet, Cleveland, if the total drops to 77.5, I think there's value on the over. Not necessarily based on where I projected it so much as the composite projection, which is closer to 81. So if you get 77.5, there's a 3.5 win gap relative to that 81 projection across the market. But Jose Ramirez for AL MVP, I think is worth betting too. His odds tend to bounce around year to year depending on previous year's performance. But this guy every year projects in the top 5 for wins above replacement amongst American League players. He's a future Hall of Famer. 30-1 this year, was 16-1 last year. Anytime this is over 25-1, I'm going to take a shot on Jose, especially with Aaron Judge nursing his toe injury and making it very clear that he's not going to be able to play a full season. So I think the AL MVP, like the AL Cy Young, kind of wide open, especially if the Yankees are going to end up trading Juan Soto, because with Cole getting hurt, Judge being hurt, Soto may get dealt out of the AL, and that would kill those tickets as well. So AL Cy Young, AL MVP, I think are pretty interesting markets to attack right now.
I'm gathering that you think the American League, generally speaking, is going to be wide open based on what you thought about Houston when we did our American League West episode.
Yeah, and taking the Twins, as a World Series future right now, I think there's teams further down the board who are interesting. And the Twins and the Mariners may have the best pitching. They really might. I don't know if your thoughts on that, Anthony, but amongst all the AL contenders, I think Seattle and Minnesota, I think I trust their pitching the most, and I feel like they have the most high upside pitching. Is there another team you prefer in that group?
It's Seattle for sure. Yeah, for me. Minnesota second.
Yeah.
Texas is hard, right?
At the end of the year, Texas.
Right, because if DeGrom comes back and then Nate Eovaldi throwing hard in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Scherzer, maybe he's got something left in the tank by October, because they kind of, I think Texas, and we'll get into this, we're going to do an NL East episode. I think it's really interesting kind of how the Braves are approaching this offseason.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when you consider these top teams who know they're going to make the playoffs are pretty confident in their high end, like their floors, how they approach their pitching to try to keep them ready for October, because really the Dodgers have been burned so many times now, and even the Braves the last couple of years. So that's really interesting. And I think the Twins have the depth. The Mariners have at least the top 4 starters are better than anybody in baseball.
Yeah, plus they have Emerson Hancock and Woo, and the Mariners are loaded. The one thing I mentioned with the Twins, and it's very important because we're projecting teams as they are now, but you do have to factor in what they're likely to add in season. The Twins were very clear that they're cutting costs, and they're really not willing to add talent right now. So that gives me significant pause, right? Not only in terms of betting them to win the World Series bigger than I did, I think it's worth a sprinkle, but can't really go all in on a team who says, this is our roster, we're really not adding pieces. They might add something, but nothing significant. Whereas the Guardians are the Tigers are the likeliest team in this division to probably go out and add pieces. And that lowers everybody's ceiling too. So just consider the Twins aren't really getting better than the roster they currently have on paper. If anything, they're getting worse given all the injury downside they have there with Correa and Lewis and, the other guys on that team. Yeah. So just worth considering the Twins are kind of standing put in terms of their talent on the current roster.
I want to do a little trivia, Brendan. Do you remember who the favorite was to win this division entering last season?
Cleveland.
It was, well, I found odds. It was basically co-favorites. And it was Chicago and Cleveland at plus 140-ish. Minnesota was plus 300. So I think the best case you can make for Cleveland is like how much is meaningfully changed between Cleveland going into last year and going into this year.
Wasn't the preseason win total on the White Sox like 81 and a half?
83 and a half was the opener.
83.
Yep.
83. That's right.
Under was my best bet for the year.
Yeah. Debundo, why don't you go ahead and weigh in on the Guardians, which, remembering, this is good for the audience too, I think, because, well, sometimes when I do these, I like to consider myself part of the audience, but this was a team that did, well, they did not strike out last year, which was one of the things that made them fun, because they would just, I don't know, they were free swinging. So they put the ball in play. And that's why I think Zerillo's got some high hope for this team. But what about their approach and a new manager with Stephen Vogt isn't the manager now with Frank Cohen gone?
Yeah, I like Stephen Vogt. I think the question is, where does the power come from? Because you have to try to look down the roster and say, okay, let's paint a picture of how Cleveland gets better. I don't really know. Like, the obvious answer is Kyle Manzardo hits for a bunch of power and gets a ton of playing time. But there's not a clear path to him doing that, because Josh Naylor is, kind of the everyday guy there. Maybe they sit him against lefties and then Manzardo gets some time against righties, but and Manzardo gets time against lefties, but that's not a path to everyday playing time. And so, maybe they're DHing one to try to get the other in the lineup more often. But if you just look at like projections from the Bad Axe, isolated power, league average 180, there's two hitters on the team that are projected to be above that on the entire roster and above average in power. It's Ramirez and it's Naylor, who's at 184. So you just don't really have, that kind of upside. Now, they had down years relatively from Steven Kwan, from Andres Jimenez. Those are guys who, if they play to what they did in 2022, they'll get more hitting from, which, will help deepen the lineup. But Cleveland's also a team for me, like, I don't see Cleveland making a big splash either. Because their biggest thing is their ability to develop pitching. And I think that's intriguing. Bybee, Logan Williams, like, interesting arms here. Logan Allen's interesting. Bieber, I expect to be better. They'll get McKenzie back. Like, there is a pretty solid pitching rotation here that probably should perform better than last year. Like, they got basically league average from Bieber for most of the season. They got almost nothing from McKenzie because he was hurt. So if you just kind of paint the picture, there is a path to them being better than last year. The question, and the reason I still like Minnesota, though, is just like, how much better can they really get to catch Minnesota? So if I had to play a win total, and I agree with Sean, it would be actually the over, because I think they're going to finish right around 500, within a game or two of 500. But I just think that their ceiling is so capped by the way they play that it felt like they squeezed everything out of that roster in 2022 to get to, barely winning the division over Minnesota and needing a lot of late heroics to do it. Also, they like, if Cleveland's kind of in the doldrums, like, they could deal Class A too. That's like very much in the cards.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and he had a good year last year. Pardon me. Yes, Bybee and Bieber. That's a good way of remembering it. Those two front end guys. Let's go to let's see who's next. The Tigers. Tigers around the same odds as the Guardians to come out of the division. Win totals at 80. Pacoda. Let's see where Pacoda has the Tigers. They have the Detroit Tigers at 75.8 wins. So that's a drop off from Minnesota and Cleveland. So the Tigers make some changes, but Zerillo, you teased this earlier in the segment that you think that maybe they're a team that is a little bit more aggressive around a trade deadline and makes some moves. Now, it all depends on how they look through Memorial Day and into the 4th of July and so on and so forth. Where are we at with the Tigers, and what are the ways to bet them this year?
I wanted to like this Tigers team. I really do. I like the direction that they're trending. I like the way they shored up their roster, especially just all the pitching that they added. They raised their floor significantly. Not a big Jack Flaherty guy, but just Flaherty, Maeda, giving them innings, right? Moving Matt Manning, who I don't really trust, down in that rotation. And then they have some live arms that could come up later in the year. Sawyer Gibson-Long, at the end of the year, was one of my favorite guys to watch. Jackson Joby, one of the top pitching prospects in the minor leagues. There's some who think Joby is a better pitching prospect than Paul Skeens. This guy's absolutely electric. Go watch some Jackson Joby highlights. Tore through the minors last year, lighting it up in spring training, not supposed to arrive till 2025. I think he's coming up this season. So the pitching, significantly better than what they've had in years past. The offense here in the bullpen is still the real concern.
Yeah.
The bullpen is kind of mid, and beyond Torkelson and Riley Green, and I like Kerry Carpenter too as a DH, but he's a DH, and he's like a DH who's a slightly above league average hitter. He's not a 3-win player. What is there to really get excited about on this team? There's huge holes in this lineup. They're not particularly good defensively. They're in a miserable offensive park. I think Colt Keith is a potential Rookie of the Year candidate. May as well mention that now. 16-1, 15-1, even 12-1 on Colt Keith. Guaranteed playing time. Signed that pre-debut extension. He's probably going to hit in the heart of this order. He's a left-handed hitter with really good power. Apparently, his defenses look better in spring, which that's the knock on him, his athleticism. Where is he going to play in the infield? Is this guy a first base kind of masking at second base? It seems like he might be able to be kind of a scratch second baseman. If he could do that and hit like you expect him to, had close to 70 extra base hits in the minors last season, I think Colt Keith is going to be a good player. So guaranteed playing time, good odds to win Rookie of the Year. I think he'll be in the mix. But in terms of the math and the projections, everybody likes this team to go under. Between 76 and 79 wins is the projected range. I'm at 76.8. Brennan, as you mentioned, Bakota, 76, 75.8. That's where they have them. So this is a consensus under between my projection, between the market projection at 80.5. Everybody is at least 3.5 wins off from that projected number. So I like this under. Do not love it just because of the direction this team is headed, right? The upward trajectory that they're currently on. But I guess I don't expect them to go 500 this season, even in a bad division. And that's scary because we'll talk about the White Sox in a minute, but I think the White Sox have the potential, as we talked about yesterday, one team could win 50 games and skew the rest of this division because everybody beats up on them and goes over their win total. So if the White Sox are a 110 loss team, yeah, this probably doesn't cash. You're kind of needing to rely a little bit on the teams in the division to be competitive, but the projections say across the board you have to go under here. So I do have to follow that, even though, as I mentioned, on paper, I do like them trending upward. And there is technically value on them to miss the playoffs. Not something I'm laying minus 200 on, but it is there. And then finally, Tarek Skubal, we talked about him through the offseason to win the AL Cy Young. Just at current prices, I don't think you can justify it. At 22-1, 20-1 where it was previously, absolutely. Now that he's had a fantastic spring, I think it's much more difficult to justify. He did lead all pitchers in wins above replacement in the second half. All of the major leagues, 2.9 more in the second half, but he also only threw 80 innings. And I've repeatedly said, you need to throw about 180 to be in the Cy Young race. I don't really see him getting more than 160 to 170. 180 is going to be pushing it. It's going to be a 100-inning increase over last season for a guy who had flexor tendon surgery less than 2 years ago. So it's going to be tough to get to that innings limit, but on a per inning basis, he should be one of the best starters in the American League. We'll see if he can stay healthy. But Tigers under. Some awards bets, though, Skubal and Keith, for their respective categories.
Skubal ranked just behind Spencer Strider and Tyler Glasnow in K-rate last year, and he was first in XFIP. So he's coming off a great year. But I feel like every time we bring up one of these great arms that's at the top of that Cy Young board, NL or AL, the injury history is annoying, and that sucks just for the sport.
And the pitch clock last year, too, really got more guys banged up. I mean, Gausman, Cole, this is really the first time they've dealt with injury concerns. So I think the pitch clock really screwed up some health. These pitchers, it's really tough to keep. Everybody's an injury risk if you're a pitcher. If you throw the baseball, you're an injury risk.
DeBundo, Tigers. You're a big Spencer Torkelson guy, right? Riley Green. Those are your dudes. I remember you talking about them all the time last year.
Well, my dude of dudes is Kerry, so I'm a little insulted that Zarilla would suggest that he's just a league average hitter.
I said above average.
I think Kerry beats his projections again. I think Kerry's underrated, pulls a lot of fly balls and gets to a lot of power, despite not being like the most heralded prospect or like huge like StatCast darling necessarily. But yeah, I mean, after Kerry, like what's this offense? Parker Meadows is the projected leadoff hitter for the Tigers this year. He's got a WRC plus projection of 82 from Bad X. Like he's not, I sold him in Dynasty. Like I don't really believe in.
I don't know. I don't know who Parker Meadows is. Was he on the team last year?
Exactly. He came up like the last 3 weeks.
Okay.
Maybe month.
He's another rookie.
You probably know his brother, Austin Meadows, who used to play in baseball. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And yeah, he's like a good outfielder who can hit a little bit, maybe hits 15 home runs, but like he's going to have OBPs at like 310 as the leadoff hitter. So I just, and then once you get past Green, Torkelson, and Carpenter again, then you're just relying on a bunch of dudes who have, kind of been a part of this generation of Tigers that we thought might come through that really had never did. Like I think nobody kind of encapsulates the Tigers more than Zach McKinstry, and not to like call him out, but like people expected a lot more from him. It hasn't really come to fruition. And as a result, they're just like kind of a collection of players. And, they went out and signed Gio Urshela. Okay. Akil Baddoo. Like we've seen enough of these guys at the major league level to know that they're not everyday regulars. How many everyday regulars does this team have that you would trust to be better than league average? I'd say 4 players. So I don't really see the upside for the Tigers here. This is not like an Arizona situation where I thought Arizona was the team that maybe got a lot of buzz coming into the season, but they had like a very obviously budding superstar and built like a pretty deep lineup that didn't have a ton of holes. This Tigers team doesn't defend the same way. They don't have a bullpen. And yes, Tarek Skubal is exciting. When he makes his first start right now, Zerillo, where would you project Tarek Skubal relative to every pitcher in baseball? Top 3, 5, 7?
Yeah, top 5.
Top 5. Top 5 starter. And I would agree with that. So here's the stats on Skubal. He had a 28.4% strikeout minus walk rate last year. That was second best amongst all MLB pitchers, minimum 70 innings. And in the time it took me to read that stat, he just added another mile per hour on his fastball and another inch of vertical break on his a ride on the fastball too. Like it's an incredible pitch, and he's putting up the numbers that baseball Twitter is going crazy about. But there's almost like a point where I don't want him to throw his max that much because he's going to get hurt. And when you sit, that high, that much velocity, you're kind of asking for injury. And so I'm a little like, okay, man, like we get it, dude. You can throw 100 now, but like, it's not going to add a ton of value relative to like sitting less, still being really, really, really good and lowering your risk of injury. So, and then kind of the other guys that make up this like Tigers breakout that's happened for 3 straight years that's never actually happened is the 2 starters in Mize and Manning. They've kind of given up on Turnbull. He's in Philly now. It's like Mize and Manning were the 2 guys that were supposed to make that leap. They're putting up good stuff numbers right now. So that's encouraging. Maybe you can buy in, but I'm going to need to see more before I buy in. The Tigers are a team that I think if they start and the rotation really does come together and maybe they get a breakout, we're going to have time to invest early in the season. And I think we can pick up on it. Whereas otherwise, like you're paying a tax right now on Detroit because of this buzz that I don't really agree with. So I would lean with the under as well, but I'm going to wait and see and get some data on some of these Tigers pitchers, mostly the back end guys, before I can figure out if I'm going to buy in. I wish they had signed Lugo and Waka instead of Maeda and Flaherty.
It's funny you say that because on our offseason recap with Colin Whitchurch, Colin was going through the signings the Tigers had made, and I said, I kind of prefer the signings the Royals made. And we'll talk about the Royals in a moment.
Flaherty, I'm out.
Yeah. The one thing with Skubal, Anthony, and you would know better than I would. So BJ and I on the awards episode, player props episode, talked about Skubal having below average stuff plus, but elite command. From what I've gathered in spring, his stuff plus numbers have jumped dramatically, and he's now an elite pitcher by stuff plus and also command. Is that correct?
Yes. Which is exciting. I mean, the thing with Skubal was he kind of changed his pitch mix a couple years ago because he had that home run problem, and then he just completely eliminated the home run problem. And now he's ratcheted up the strikeout rate. Like he's kind of mixed and matched his way to really good production. There still could be a season where he puts it all together and pitches more than 70 innings and is your AL Cy Young. It wouldn't shock me. But at 10-1 now, like there's at least a 20% chance he's missing significant time with injury. So that's going to be a big fork in the road, especially when you have guys like Kirby and Castillo who have much better injury histories to bank on, and we're just younger and don't have major surgeries in the past.
Yeah, Logan Gilbert, 109 innings last year as well. There's a lot of guys who've already hit the innings threshold who Even Grayson, 160 professional innings last year. Much easier to go from 160 to 180 or 200 than it is to go from 80 innings to 200. I mean, it's a very high bar for Skubal to double up his innings, more than double up his innings this year. It's a lot.
So therefore, we just presented the upside and really what could be the downside of the Tigers, and why they could be annoying if you take unders in this division, or if they end up having a good year. There are going to be opportunities with the Tigers throughout the season, and I think that's the case too for the Kansas City Royals with what they've got built for this coming season. Plus 900 to come out of the division. Win total set at 73.5. So I'm reminding Jabundo, you had a name for him. I know it's Cole Reagans, but what did we call him? Cole Hamels Reagans?
That was Tanner. Yeah, Tanner called him Cole Hamels Reagans something or other. I don't know. It's something to do with his changeup, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, when he really, in my opinion, when he really made a name for himself was when the Royals played the Cubs in a Friday Cubs system play, and he pitched his ass off, and he delivered on Cub. Well, I think the Cubs won, the Royals didn't, or the Royals were winning, and Reagans pitched well, regardless. But standalone game Friday afternoon, Cole Reagans had the spotlight, and he was good. He pitched well against Boston too, I remember correctly. Bobby Witt Jr., somebody else that they've got as a star, got a big contract. So, Zerillo, you said you liked their moves. They added Renfroe, Seth Lugo, Michael Wacha. Do you like this Royals team?
This bullpen is going to be so much better than it was last year, and that was probably their biggest issue, is they had nobody to get outs in the late innings, and they were giving up 9 runs and blowing leads, and they actually scored some runs last year offensively. I think this is a better offense than what Detroit offers. I think pretty comfortably a better offense than what Detroit offers, especially if Vinny Pasquantino, podcast favorite, one of Anthony and my favorites, especially if Vinny is back to where 90% of what he was previously prior to injury. But there's some potential superstars in this lineup, not just Bobby Witt. There's a list last year of players who hit the ball at least 113 miles an hour, max EV, with at least a 11% barrel rate, I believe. And the list is like all of the best hitters in baseball: Judge, Acuna, Soto, and then MJ Melendez. MJ Melendez is due for a significant breakout year for them. I think this guy is going to be a big power hitter. I'm very high on Nelson Velasquez. I actually don't see Nelson listed on their major league roster right now, so I'm not sure what he's doing in spring training. But Nelson Velasquez had ridiculous power metrics last year. I think he's a guy with 40 home run upside, legitimate 40 home run upside. There's pieces on this team, and they completely revamped that bullpen, brought in a ton of arms. I mean, my hot take is that the Royals are going to finish ahead of the Tigers in this division. Now, again, looking at my math, my projections, that's not what it says. So don't take me, I'm going to go look up Cirilla's projections. He must have the Royals ahead of the Tigers. No, I have the Tigers at 77 wins. I have the Royals at 70. So I have the Tigers very much ahead of the Royals. It's my hot take that the Royals are going to finish ahead of the Tigers. I just like this team better on paper. I think it's a deeper team. And I think their stars are better. I think Bobby Witt is better than anything the Tigers have. I think Bobby Witt is worth betting for MVP. I think he's the second best player in the American League. By American League WAR in the second half, final 4 months, Witt finished second behind Julio Rodriguez. I think he's a great bet not only for American League MVP, but for AL hits leader as well at 30-1. He projects 6th in hits on my hits leaderboard. I believe he was second in the AL over the final 4-month stretch last year, and 6th overall in baseball. So Witt worth betting not only in terms of American League MVP, but also hits leader. And as I mentioned, right, I'm at 70 wins on this team. The public projection is much more in line with the market. I would recommend an under. I'm not going to bet the under because the public projection is anywhere between 71 and 75 wins. And I make that composite projection, which goes, okay, I like the under, but the public projection really says this is much more in line with their win total. And when I average all those out, I don't get an actionable bet. So if they were under 75, I would consider betting it, not where it is currently. There is value on them to miss the playoffs. Not betting that at minus 550 either. But I think Bobby Witt, the guy worth betting here. I think Salvi worth taking the fantasy draft super late because he's like the definition of a boring veteran. And hopefully Vinny P has a nice bounce back season. But there's pieces on this team I think are part of their next competitive team. Melendez, Witt, obviously Vinny, but even Michael Massey, is a guy who interests me. So Michael Garcia, going to get a lot of at-bats for them this year. They're going to give him a strong look at third base. There's pieces, unlike the Tigers, who, as Anthony mentioned, like, we're kind of sick of a lot of the guys on this roster. We know what they are. The Royals actually have guys with upside who can project to progress, whereas the Tigers are a lot of guys who are known commodities.
Bundo, you got anything to follow with the Royals? We got to get it to the White Sox too, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, favorite team to, like, if it's not going to be the Twins, I'm going to take the Royals at 10-1. I think this lineup has been more upside. Yes. I think there's a lot of buzz on Detroit to win the division at like plus 380, 400. I think the Royals are a much better bet. I think the Royals are, I don't want to say like most likely, but relative to market on Cleveland, Kansas City, and Detroit, I think Kansas City is your best value bet to like have a huge leap. And I know they're coming from a really low floor, right? Like they were one of the worst teams in the league last year, but Sean mentioned it, like the bullpen can't be worse and it looks better on paper. And I know that they only won 56 games, but the Pythagorean had them closer to like 64-ish wins. They went out and spent money to plug holes to get like league average or better production at some of their back end starting rotation spots, which I have more faith in those guys than I do Maeda and Flaherty, like we just talked about. And Vinny's back. So I was curious, like how much massaging of the data would I need to do to craft a narrative to the point where the Royals had a good offense? After August 1st, they were league average. So there you go. After July 1st, they were
the Reagan's effect.
Yeah, exactly. He helped them hit too, but it felt that way. Remember, betting last season in the second half, it was like, man, the Royals are scoring a lot of runs here. It's something they weren't really doing early in the year, and that was without Vinny Pasquantino, who did not play the second half and who is their second best hitter. So you get his constant on base skills, his contact skills in the lineup. He has looked, pretty good in spring training thus far in terms of batted ball stuff. So not too worried about his shoulder. And you mentioned it, Witt could take that leap. And I think that, if he has an MVP caliber season and they get, production from Melendez and Velasquez and even Michael Massey at the back end of the lineup is interesting to me. So I think that the Royals have the more upside to beat projections than any team in this division.
Just the one concern, as we mentioned with Skubal, is Reagans in the innings. And I think Reagans is going to be one of the best pitchers in the AL as long as he's on the mound. But he only threw 123 innings last season. And seeing Jeff Passan in his article have a scout refer to him as a left-handed DeGrom is accurate because he has the skills, but also I think he's probably going to get hurt at some point. So I don't think Cole Reagans is holding up. I think he's a fun bet for Cy Young. I don't know if he's getting past 150 innings or staying durable for a full season. So that is the concern with Reagans, is durability.
Well, you're honest, Zerillo, so you have to keep it real. Kind of got excited about Cole Reagans, and that was a blunder there to the discussion.
Just urging caution, that's all.
Yes. Did he start from the beginning, like in April last year, or did he not come up?
He was traded for Aroldis Chapman.
Right.
He was working out of the bullpen for Texas, and Texas completely misread that one because I'm sure they would have had Reagans then Chapman by the end of the year.
No kidding.
But yes, Kansas City thrust him in the rotation. He had started in the minors. I think given past injuries, Texas was sort of nursing his arm in the bullpen.
Got it. Okay. We won't spend any more time on Aroldis Chapman. Let's go to the White Sox.
You guys get doing the NL Central preview?
Nope, we didn't get to that. And there's no need to elaborate even more. Let's go to the Chicago White Sox in the basement of the division. The White Sox over at Pacoda projected to win 66 games, right on the dot. So it's Oakland and then the White Sox. And then you get up into the 70s for the rest of the American League. I can't believe that still. 83.5 wins last year, but their projected win total preseason opener, 83.5. Zerillo, White Sox. Are they going to be, is there any hope for the White Sox, how you might want to bet them? Or are they like let's wait till the season starts and see what it looks like?
I got heat for saying their under was the best bet last season. I mean, we tweeted out the video of me saying this is my best bet, and people were like, oh, look at all the stars on this roster. What are you talking about? Like, I don't know what I'm talking about.
That's what people say.
I've nailed the White Sox every season that I've been at the Action Network. I think year 2, they were my favorite over bet. Once they started investing, the Yasmani Grandal signing that whole offseason. And then I've been on their unders every year since. I do not show any value regarding the White Sox this year. I do not have any bet on the White Sox this year. The one bet I would consider is worst regular season record. I just don't think the value is there in terms of where they're aligned. I project them at 63 wins. The projection market actually likes the over on this team. Everybody has them between 66 and 67 wins. But if you bake in the fact that they're probably going to trade Dylan Cease, Moncada and Eloy both have team options. Both of those guys could be dealt. Andrew Vaughn, I do not think is going to progress. This might be the worst bullpen in baseball by potentially a significant margin. And even though Luis Roberts, superstar, maybe he gets traded, I think unlikely not, but he's best friends with Yoel Moncada. These guys have been friends since they were teenagers in Cuba, played in the WBC together. If Moncada gets traded, does Robert just stop caring completely? Does he have to care at all? So the downside is significant here. I think they could lose 110 games, especially if they trade all these guys. There's just no value for me betting under 63 when I have the total projected at 62.9. So it's a pass. Yeah. But worst regular season record, I think, is the one way to consider them. If you got them at 8-1 for worst regular season record, that might interest me.
Michael Kopech is their number 2 right now, and he's got injury issues. He's been leaving games early the last handful of years.
Not a starter. Yeah. He is a starter, but he's not a starter. You know what I'm saying? He is not going to be one for much longer, I don't think.
Okay. All right. Bundo wrap it.
Chris Sale, Yoan Moncada, Michael Kopech trade a lose-lose ultimately for both teams.
I would say the Chris Sale worked out decently well
because they won a World Series, but that extension was horrible.
True.
But anyway, go ahead, Bundo. Take us home. Thoughts on the White Sox?
I mean, Dylan Cease. What are the odds he's on the team opening day? 40%?
Yeah, 50-50.
So by the time.
So who's getting them? Yankees?
Rangers for me are still the dark horse. Yeah.
Orioles as well.
The Rangers.
Yeah, Ken Rosenthal the power move by the Orioles.
And then Nightingale said the Yankees were inquiring because of
Cole.
Because of Cole. Also, Snell is just not signed yet, which is just insane. But
and Montgomery.
Yeah. 2 weeks to opening day. Just amazing. I don't know. But either way, I think when you look at this White Sox team, you have to ask who stands to gain the playing time from them trading everybody, and what are the odds that they're valuable contributors. And the odds on some of these guys are so low because they don't have a good upper minors farm system. There's nothing to really Colson Montgomery's the one guy that everybody's kind of hyping, and I get it. He's probably maybe the future centerpiece of this whole team. But after that, you're looking at Dominic Fletcher was a guy that got back in a trade. Nicky Lopez is still on the team. Martin Maldonado is going to catch every day. This is a pretty rough outlook for this roster, given that the 3 biggest hitters they have. We mentioned with Vaughn. I think Vaughn is just kind of just what he is at this point. The breakout never came. Eloy's injuries, problems, and I do think Luis Roberts going to get traded closer to the deadline because he's nearing the age now where he's at his peak, and the White Sox are nowhere near ready to compete for anything. So just from a pure okay, they were 83.5 last year. We all love the under. Now it's 20 wins lower. There probably should be a natural, if you're I love the White Sox under, you probably missed the boat, right? You're probably you're selling at the absolute floor, but it just could get so much worse for them with all these trades. I think I'd say it's 30-40% that Robert is traded by the deadline, maybe 50%. I think Cease is gone. And Eloy could realistically be gone too. So if they just blow this up, which is the smart thing to do, the second half, could be really rough. And the White Sox bullpen, I think the Rockies are probably worse. That might be it. So I have no bet on this team. I have no interest in this team. I almost wanted to take a flyer on Robert for MVP, but you just can't win MVP on a team this bad. You're not going to get the counting stats. He has the upside to have a 40-40 season if he cares. If he got traded in the American League to a good team, that would be really interesting. But I just can't quite get there because he's gonna maybe not care.
He has future Yankee written all over him to me.
Yes.
He looked good in pinstripes.
Yeah.
Quick heads up.
They have Dominguez, right? That's the.
I think because goes in left field, Robert in center.
A quick heads up, the great state of North Carolina officially launched sports betting on Monday, March 11th. So if you're in the Tar Heel State, take advantage of the best sign-up offers across every sports book. You can find a link to every one of those offers in the description of this episode. All the North Carolina offers all in one place. Just check out the link in the episode description. We've gone a little long on this one, so let's keep this quick. I'll go Zerillo first, then DeBundo. Favorite win total, favorite stat leader award bet, best bet for the AL Central. Go.
Detroit Tigers under, if you can get, I would say 80.5 or better, even 80 or better on the under. That's where I go. Award/stat leader, Bobby Witt props. Witt 20-1 or better for AL MVP. And if you can get 25 to 1 or better on hits leader, I like both of those. And in terms of best bet, let's go with the Guardians to win the division to 4-1. As I said, the most conservative projection out there from Fangraphs makes this plus 398 to win the division. So you're betting a break-even price at worst. Pacoda makes this line plus 140. So that would be substantial value. I'm at the lower end of the projection, would still recommend betting this. So Guardians to win the AL Central at 4-1 would take that to about plus 350.
All right, DeBundo, do it up.
I don't have any official win totals in here, but Minnesota to win the division is my best bet. There's a minus 110 out there. I just think their floor and ceiling are pretty high in terms of them outclassing teams that don't really have a huge ceiling, especially, the two closest contenders in Detroit and Cleveland, who I'm really not as much a believer in getting to like 85 wins, which is, I think, what you need to win this division. The Royals are my favorite long shot if you're looking to buy. I don't necessarily love like going over their number because I do think it's a little inflated based off of this kind of like preseason hype. But again, like they have the higher upside and wider range of outcomes than the Tigers and the Guardians for me. My favorite bet in terms of like a fun prop is Witt steals leader. I think somebody mentioned it already. Somebody pinged me about it when I put it in the app. But Witt 9-1, most steals. You have Acuna dealing with like this knee soreness, and I think Acuna went all out last year chasing that 40-70 and going crazy. And he also had a career year in terms of every single stat he had, which we'll get to in the NL East preview. But if he takes a step back and Estero Ruiz, as good as he is at stealing bases, does have some playing time risk if he's not hitting. Also could hit lower in the order more than he did last year. Last year, he hit top of the lineup a lot, even though he wasn't hitting well. So there's risk for him to lose playing time. Thus, I think that opens the door for Witt, who if he gets on base more, takes more of a step forward. You mentioned most hits, Zerillo, correlated, of course, to most steals because the Royals did steal a good amount last year, and I think they could continue to be aggressive on the base path. Make up for their
as I mentioned with Julio and Witt, my biggest concerns for steals leader with them is that they hit for too much power, too many doubles, too many homers, and just not enough opportunities to be on first base. But absolutely agree. Like plenty of correlation there with steals leader, hits leader for both, in addition to their MVP props. I think across the board, those are the best three ways to bet those guys.
All right, for a week division, we got to quite a bit in this American League Central preview. So that is going to wrap it up on this episode of Payoff Pitch. Find all of our other MLB division previews wherever you listen to your podcasts. But of course, it's Payoff Pitch presented by BetMGM. Download the free award-winning Action Network app. Find DeBundo, find Zerillo, find our other contributors with their content leading up to opening day. And you'd want to follow them throughout the course of the season. If you're in North Carolina, excited to do some MLB betting, make sure you check out the link in the episode description for all of those tasty offers. And again, please rate, review, subscribe, audio, our YouTube channel as well here at Action Network. For Zerillo and DeBundo, Brendan Glasheen, thanks for tuning in. We will catch you next time here on Payoff Pitch, Action Network's MLB betting podcast.